Joining us is Olu Brown, former pastor of Impact Church and candidate for governor of Georgia. Mr. Brown, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you for having me.
So the first question I want to ask is a question that a lot of people across the state might ask. Who is Olu Brown?
Olu Brown is a former pastor, a faith leader, a small business owner, and a person who loves people and community. That's who Olu Brown is. And he's offering himself for governor of the state of Georgia for 2026.
So you have never been in politics before. Why now?
So this is my first time running for office. My history and career as a pastor, I believe, prepared me for this role as the governor of a state. Because a governor is a CEO, the executive leader, and as a pastor of taking a church from 25 people to thousands of people to a multi-million-dollar budget, having to negotiate with municipalities, having to negotiate a number of complex issues, I believe those leadership principles translate to the governor's office. But more than anything, I care about people, and I think great governors care about people.
Where did the appetite to run come from? Did you have a call of action from people in your community? Maybe you're the former pastor now,
yes.
But members of the church. Where did this idea even come from?
So the call of action came from my life's journey. People who grew up with me would not be surprised that I'm two things, a preacher and a politician. Even as a teenager, I remember going before city council, getting signatures from community members because we were concerned about a decision that the city was making. Being a student leader in undergrad, being a student leader in my whole academic career, and also as a pastor, having to work to build economic development for the community we were in, which is East Point, and developing a warehouse that was a blight to the community that now is a place for job training, graduation for students, and also as an economic driver. So oftentimes when people hear clergy or pastor, they would think Sunday only, but for folks who worked in local churches and faith communities like me, it was a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week engagement with the community directly. And so those are the things that I think are very important for the office of the governor.
And I'm glad that you bring up East Point and the community surrounding Impact Church because you're very well known in that community. How are you going to be able to take your notoriety in East Point and spread it statewide?
Well, I'm fortunate to be a part of a denomination that is global in nature, and having one of the fastest growing congregations in that denomination. I'm known throughout Georgia, I'm known throughout the United States, and also throughout parts of the world. So we'll leverage that history of working with leaders, not only in faith communities, but leaders in the academic world, the business world. And we're doing something called listening sessions. We've done more than 30 of those, where we've been in homes, at kitchen tables, in living rooms, in places of business, in recreation, and we're meeting with people one-on-one. And so we're taking an organic approach of continue to get my name out throughout Metro Atlanta, throughout North in the mountains, throughout Middle Georgia, South Georgia, and Coastal Georgia. And we also believe people are going to help out across the United States of America who believe in this election and who believe in me.
And I know you did your campaign announcement on Instagram in May. I believe it was May 20th when that dropped. Can you talk about the timing of why you decided to announce that?
So we were fortunate to have thousands of viewers to see that campaign announcement. I believe that great politicians are hard workers, and I'm a hard worker. And you also have to start early. So we were one of the first to announce on the Republican or Democratic side because we believe that Georgia deserves a candidate who's working for them, and they demonstrate it in the campaign process. And so I raised my hand and I announced first, and I've been running ever since.
Mr. Brown, you are entering a race with some folks who have a lot of history in politics, Keisha Lance Bottoms, Jason Estevez, among some of those other names that are in this race right now. How are you, Derek Jackson as well, how are you going to stand out from that path?
So I stand out with my track record. I don't believe people are looking for folks with a long political resume because they've been disappointed with career politicians. Because if being a career politician solved our problems in our communities, we wouldn't have many of the issues that we have, not only locally, regionally, and throughout the state. I think folks are looking for people who are authentic, people who are honest, and who truly care and are willing to fight with them. So my whole career and my resume as a community leader, as a small business owner, has been about being in in community, listening to people first, and solving some very complex problems that they face and that the community faces. And I believe that makes you a great politician, not your resume and how many offices you've served in.
Do you think that you have an advantage because you do not have a background in politics?
I believe I do. And so a lot of those individuals with long resumes are going to have to answer to voters that in many points and concerns have been disappointed. I don't have that kind of history with voters. For me, it's a fresh start, and people will wonder, Olu, do you have the experience? Do you have the credentials? Leadership translates, and my experience and my credentials are working with people to solve difficult and complex problems and making sure we make a difference in their everyday lives. So I've got the resume of working with people, I've got the resume of being a leader, and I also have the resume of having a ROI and a return on investment for voters and communities, and that's what I bring to the table, and I think that's what gives me a leg up.
Can I ask you about policy? Day one, say you get this job, what is the first issue you want to tackle? So
one of the first things we want to tackle is education in Georgia. Right now, Georgia ranks about 50. Well, we rank about, out of all of our states, we're about halfway in our country, and that's unacceptable. We need an education system that's designed and responds to the individual learner throughout Georgia. And regardless of the zip code a kid is born in, they ought to be getting a great education. So in the first 100 days, I'm going to as many schools as I can throughout the state of Georgia. Not to tell the principal, not to tell the teachers what to do, but to have presence so that they know they have a governor who sees them and a governor who cares about them. And then we're going to work with our elected officials to make sure that all of our kids in Georgia are receiving a quality education. So that's going to be one of the first policy agenda items that we tackle in the first 100 days as governor of this state.
Now, in addition to visiting and showing a presence, is the issue funding? Is the issue hiring? What are you seeing? Like, what would you like to
It's all the
specifically
above.
change?
It's making sure we have a formula so that every school is receiving the funding that they need in order to give the best to their students. We also need to look at teacher education pay. Some of our teachers are the lowest paid. I think Georgia teachers ought to be the highest paid in the country.
How would you do that?
So we would do it in several different ways. We can look at tax benefits. We can also look at our surplus. We're a state with $16 billion in surplus. Now, I'm fiscally responsible, but I also believe we got enough money to directly impact our educators in their classrooms. And when I talk about education, it's not just something I know from a distance. I have a lifetime teaching certificate for grades 1 through 8. I was raised by educators. I am an educator. So I know very close up what it means to be an educator and have a passion for students, but struggle to survive to pay your bills. And so as governor, we can do something about that.
Can I ask you this? If you become governor, you will have a relationship with the administration in Washington. That administration has said they want to pass a lot of power back down to the states. If you're elected, for a portion of your tenure as governor, you will be working with President Donald Trump.
Yes.
How do you navigate that relationship?
So one, I'll navigate it the way I've done with leaders throughout my history, making sure we collaborate, the things that we agree on, we work together on, and we're honest with each other about the things we don't agree on.
Do you see yourself agreeing with things with President Trump?
So I believe as the next governor, I'll work with whoever the president is to make sure we get the very best for the state of Georgia. And we've got to take it issue by issue and policy by policy.
What would you do about the immigration policy that's going on right now? We recently saw protests all over the country, including right here in Georgia. We have heard from mostly Democrats and independents, some Republicans, not all, some, that they're not happy with what President Trump is doing right now.
So I believe in the freedom of speech, and I believe people should have the right to protest respectfully without damaging property and without hurting fellow human beings. So first and foremost, I believe our country should represent a state and a country that gives people the right of freedom of speech, and that's what we're seeing happen. But as it relates to immigration, I believe that we need to look at our immigration policies federally that impact our states like Georgia. I believe we should protect our borders borders, but I also believe in fair immigration. We are a nation of immigrants, and what makes the United States of America great is that we are a nation of diversity. So we'll work as the governor of this state with our federal government to make sure we have immigration policy that's fair and right for all people.
I know Governor Brian Kemp, he has been steadfast in following the directives from the Trump administration with our law enforcement and ICE officials. Really, they say they're following the law. They go in, do what they need to do. Would you follow that directive, or would you bring any type of pushback to what the administration is doing right now?
So where the administration is doing policy that criminalizes individuals who are citizens and hardworking people, yes, we would give pushback. But as the governor, we would work with our local sheriffs, we would work with all of our law enforcement to make sure in Georgia we're enforcing the laws, but we're not criminalizing hardworking citizens and overreaching.
What does that look like?
So, for instance, the president has just mentioned that they're going to push back on taking people from farming communities and the hotel industry. And so it looks like that on a state level of saying we understand what the federal government is saying, but we also care about Georgians. And there's a way that we can apply the law fairly and with grace. But it takes a governor who cares about people and who sees all people, regardless of where they're from or where they live. And that's the kind of governor that I'll be.
Can I ask you about gun safety? Because that's another very big one here. Of course, in Georgia, there's a lot of residents who truly value their right to bear arms, their Second Amendment right. But some people feel that the gun is the issue when it comes to issues like Appalachia High School, when you see horrific shootings, or any other just daily gun violence that we report on the news every single day. What's your plan to tackle that?
It breaks my heart that what we would call soft targets in Georgia or the United States of America have become killing zones. And many of these soft targets are schools and places of faith where people come to represent their religious expressions and often are targeted. So first and foremost, as a citizen of Georgia and as a citizen of the United States of America, it breaks my heart to see innocent people whose lives are being taken, in particular our young people and our students. I believe in the right to bear arms, and as governor, I would never take that away from people. But I do believe in what we can call gun control that relates to managing ownership of guns that makes sense. Unfortunately, we see the recent shooting and deaths of the lawmakers in Minnesota, and we see the type of weaponry the individual had. We have to pass gun legislation that's responsible, that gives people the right to bear arms, but it doesn't allow people to go and literally take out entire schools and places of worship and large numbers of people in just seconds.
Now, in order to pass that legislation, you would have to convince those legislators under the Gold Dome to do that. We saw a proposal from Speaker John Burns at the beginning of the last legislative session tackling some gun reform. He said that he would be open to certain things, but even towards sine die at the end of session, we did not see many, at least Democrats said that a lot of their proposed legislation got shot down. I think all of it did. How do you convince legislators, predominantly, mostly Republican legislators, to go along with what you're saying right now?
It's what I've done my whole career. I've worked with people who have different opinions and different beliefs than I do to come to common ground. And I think people are more willing than ever to find common ground because nobody wants to bury a second grader or a third grader. No one wants to go to a faith community or another soft target in Georgia and have to tell a crying parent or a grandparent that we're sorry. So as the governor, we will find common ground and work for gun reform that still honors gun ownership, but we have sensible gun ownership. But we're also going to go to the communities throughout Georgia. And I think that's a hallmark of my leadership as your next governor, is going to every community, to every citizen, and asking people what makes sense in Georgia. And I think when the lawmakers hear from the people, we can have greater gun reform.
During the election of 2024, all the way through now, the polling shows that that number one issue for most voters is still money, their pocketbooks, how much things are costing right now. If you were elected as governor of Georgia, how would you help to ease that pain?
So first, I'm not a wealthy person, and so I understand what it means to have to pay your bills every single month. Also came from a family that wasn't wealthy. And when you look at the great majority of Georgians, they're not wealthy. So the first thing I want people to understand, as your governor, I represent who you are because I am where you are in so many ways. And so the legislation that will pass and how we will look at economic accessibility and reform in the state of Georgia will be what you would hope for, because that's the experience that I have. So we're going to look at everything from taxation. We're going to look at investing in small business ownership. We're going to look at what it means to help Georgians who work for large companies make more money, and everything we need to do to make sure that Georgians are making more and that they're experiencing less taxation and that they can afford to buy the basic necessities of life, from clothing to food to health care. All of these things impact everyday Georgians. And as your next governor, I'm going to do everything I can every single day to make sure we're making Georgia affordable for all Georgians and not just a small minority of Georgians.
So you're committed to trying to lower taxes?
I'm committed to looking at everything and finding the best solutions that will work for Georgia. And it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, but it's going to be looking at a very complex situation to find solutions that work for the majority of Georgians.
Can you talk to me just about what the next, let's say, throughout 2025? We're still early, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these announcements are coming very, very early. The election's not until next November. Of course, the primary at the beginning of the year. But what does the rest of your 2025 look like?
So the rest of my 2025 looks like going throughout every corner of Georgia, continue to meet with people in places of business and community centers. This weekend, we're having our Southeast Georgia tour. So I'll be in Baxley, Georgia. I'll be in Savannah, Georgia. I'll be in Brunswick, Georgia. On Juneteenth celebration, I'll be in Metro, Georgia at a 5K. I've been throughout Georgia, and I'll continue to do that. And we've been asking these three questions. What do you love about Georgia? What are your concerns about Georgia, and what would you change? So unlike most politicians, instead of filling the space telling you what I think, I want to fill the space hearing what you think, so that you know, as your next governor, as we are passing legislation and policy, we are directly informed by the citizens. That's why we're calling this a people-powered campaign, and that's the difference for Olu Brown administration.
And that's interesting that you say that too, because I mean, that's been a big critique of constituents, of their congresspeople, of their leaders, their politicians, is that y'all aren't listening to us. We're frustrated. And that's Republicans and Democrats.
Yes. And it's a real reality. But I can tell you, as a person who has spent his whole career having to sit with people at the beginning of life and sit with people at the very end of life, there's one thing that I've learned that people respect more than anything, and that is, do you hear me and do you care about me? And are you willing to fight with me and for me? And that's the same thing I'll bring to the governor's office for the state of Georgia. I'll hear you, I care about you, and not only will I fight for you, I'll fight with you. And we're going to do the very best for Georgia.
Another issue I wanted to ask you about is the gray area that several people say that they are seeing with the heartbeat law here in Georgia. As a former pastor, I mean, even morally, the church has a view on abortion as well. What are your thoughts on solving and answering this question of this gray area where medical professionals don't know what they can legally do within this law?
So when I speak on abortion and abortion rights, I can't speak for the whole church or the whole state of Georgia. I believe women should have a right over their own bodies. And as the next governor, I'll do everything that I can to support that. I have 4 kids. 2 of those are young women who are 20 and 21 years old. And I want them to know, as citizens of this state, that they have full right and authority over their body, not only as women, but as citizens of Georgia and as citizens of the United States of America.
So would you go as far as to try to repeal the heartbeat law?
I wouldn't say what I would do at this time, but I would say we would convene a group of experts and community members, and we would review the law, and we would make a decision that says, how do we move forward, making sure that we pass legislation as it relates to the rights of women that's fair for all women.
But right now you are against the law. If you said that women should have the right to choose.
I'm not against the law. What I am saying, I am pro-choice.
Mr. Olu Brown, we truly appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming to the studio.
Thank you, Faith.
And we'd love to check in with you as we get closer to the primary.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.